And go.
Getting all kinds of copyright strikes this morning, right? Morning, everybody. Welcome to day 44 of Breakfast in Biology. 10 days to go. True story. Let's see. Who do we have in? I don't know if I've noticed any new names yet. We'll have to see if our bounty worked.
I don't know. Alexi is back though.
Oh, sweet. Elijah. Elijah's back. We haven't seen him in a while.
Darius. Dom here. Emily. Finley. Annie.
Nice.
Alexis. Maya. Carissa. Esteban.
Jonathan Miller's back.
Jessica. Jake.
Emma.
Erica.
Oh, yes. Breaking.
All right. So I think we got everybody. It's good to see everybody. Today, we are talking about evolution. And it might get a little sketchy. It might get a little controversial, maybe. Maybe not. Probably not. Could it possibly? Maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to share my screen with you. I'm trying to stall while I do that. What is evolution? So the first question for you today in the chat, down here in the chat, what's evolution, people? Can you give us an answer to that? Elijah says he has other work to do and had family stuff. Like that's more important than your biological family right here online. Looking in the chat, what's evolution? All right, Tony Noble, change over time. How things change over time from Jessica. Very good. These are great answers. Change over time. In fact, the next slide that I have just says change ahead. So change over time. So here we go. Mrs. Smith and I have been spending the last 10 minutes talking about this video clip. I brought this video clip that I want to show you. At first, Mrs. Smith wasn't sure I should show it to you. It could be. All right. I'm going to show it to you. And I want you to pay.
And we'll talk.
Yeah. I want you to pay attention. I want you to think about what's being said. And so one of the reasons it's really important to me to show you this is because people ask all the time, why do we have to learn this? Why do we go to school? Why do we have to take biology? And we want you to become intelligent citizens of the United States that can think for themselves and understand bigger picture things. So the person in this clip we're about to show is Mike Pence. We're going to show about 2 minutes of it. This is long ago. This is years ago. This is no way in disparaging Mike Pence at all. but we want you to think about what he says, and we're going to talk about what he says because we think it's really important that you understand it. And maybe he would agree with us, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. We'll find out. So I have to reshare that with you because I have to do it so you can hear the sound. Chrome tab. Let's see. Mic Pens. Share audio. All right. Are you ready? Here you go. Pay attention. Close attention.
Evolution not taught as a sincere theory of biologists, but rather, Mr. Speaker, taught as fact. Unless anyone listening in would doubt that, we can all see in our mind's eye that grade room classroom we all grew up in with the linear depiction of evolution just above the chalkboard. There's the little monkey crawling on the grass. There's the Neanderthal with his knuckles dragging, and then there's Mel Gibson standing in all of his glory. It is what we have been taught, that man proceeded and evolved along linear lines. But now comes a new find by paleontologists in the newspapers all across America. A new study in Nature magazine. 6 to 7 million year old skull has been unearthed, the Torme skull, and it suggests that human evolution was actually, according to a new theory, human evolution was taking place, and I'm quoting now, all across Africa and on the earth. And the earth was once truly, and I quote, a planet of the apes on which nature was experimenting with many human-like creatures. Paleontologists are excited about this, Mr. Speaker, but no one's pointing out that the textbooks, I guess, will need to be changed because the old theory of evolution taught for 77 years in the classrooms of America as fact is suddenly replaced by a new theory, or I hasten to add, I'm sure we'll be told, a new fact. Well, the truth is it always was a theory, Mr. Speaker. And now that we've recognized evolution as a theory, I would simply and humbly ask, can we teach it as such? And can we also consider teaching other theories of the origin of species, like the theory that was believed in by every signer of the Declaration of Independence? Every signer of the Declaration of Independence believed that men and women were created and were endowed by that same creator.
Okay, so first of all, in so many ways, Mike Pence in this speech is correct. And in several ways, he's incorrect. These are our opinions. But we'll see what you think. So you've told me in the chat that evolution was change over time. It was organisms changing over time. That is evolution. And that is a fact. And that is provable and has been proven many, many times that organisms change over time. So we are, as your biology teachers, just like he said, teaching evolution as a fact in that organisms change over time. However, how they change, the mechanism in which they change, and the extent at which they have changed is what we would call the evolutionary theory. And so the evolutionary theory takes all the science that we know, looks at it, puts it together, and uses that to explain how evolution happens. And that is a theory. And so where he, I think, has kind of fallen off, and why we think it's so important to talk to you about this topic and get you to really understand it, is that when new science happens, we have to adjust our thoughts based on new information. And that's why something is a theory, because a theory is ever changing. So that's the first way of breaking it down. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. Ms. Smith, do you want to jump in? Do you want to add to that? Or?
So I was going to say, it's like, the other part of that is, and I usually say this when we're in the classroom, is that it's a really big misconception that someone that is religious can believe in evolution. And so there's no reason that you can't believe in the evolutionary theory and have faith. And so, trying not to cross lines here, you just want to make sure that you don't have to only have one or the other. The other thing that I want to point out that I usually do is that there's this misconception that scientists argue over whether or not the evolutionary theory should exist. And that's not the case. Scientists don't argue about whether or not evolution exists because, as we've just said, evolution has changed over time. What they might perhaps have discussions about, like Mr. Suter said, is the mechanism behind it, how it's occurring, when it's occurring, why is it occurring. So, as we move forward, we're just asking you to kind of keep an open mind and to listen and to think about things as we're going forth.
Right. I want to add to that, because at the very end there, he started to say, well, can we teach another theory? And again, I would say there's a problem here, because if you are a Buddhist, if you are a Muslim, if you are a Christian, if you're a Catholic, if you're Jewish, doesn't matter. Whatever your religion is, whatever God that you believe in, you do not believe in your God based on a theory. You believe in your God based on faith. And that faith is typically unquestionable, right? You do not need science to prove your faith. In fact, the whole point of faith is that you believe in something without science to prove it. Therefore, that's not something that we would teach in a science class. If that makes sense. And that's why it happens. So what we're teaching is, hey, look, we have seen organisms change. We know they change. The question is, how do they change and why do they change? And then the bigger thing is, and we're going to get into this, there's two different types of evolution. There's kind of a microevolution and a macroevolution. We can see microevolution happening. In your lifetime, you can see organisms evolving through microevolution. Macroevolution is that idea that like amphibians became reptiles and reptiles became birds and birds, right? That those big leaps of evolution. And that's where some people have a little more trouble, right? So microevolution is very easy to understand. It's very easy to see. And it's very easy to kind of say how it happens. Macroevolution is the one that people get a little bit like, I don't know that I really buy that. So what we're going to do over the next couple of days is kind of start breaking this down. Like, how does it happen? Why do scientists believe this? Why is there an evolutionary theory? Why do we say, here's why we think a reptile is related to an amphibian, and an amphibian is related to a fish, and a fish is related to, Charles Darwin never said that people came from monkeys. That's a misconception. He did say monkeys and people came from the same common ancestors. So it's actually kind of worse than what he said, So that's what we're going to get into. That's what we're going to talk about.
Right. And and we're going to get into this more, but just to kind of, just mention, we've been coming from the genetics and the DNA unit and talking about how we all have the same DNA. So just something to kind of, or the same nucleotides, so something to think about as we move on.
And not just all of us, every organism on Earth.
Right.
In fact, you have spent the last year being taught evolution by Mrs. Smith and I. Now we're just going to show you how it all links together. So, but before we can do that, we got to talk about this guy. So in the chat, who is this guy? That's Uncle Suter, right? Can I do it? Can I get there? I can't get in the camera this thing. That is a handsome man right there. Look at that dude. That is one stunning individual.
Whose beard is longer?
I think I might have him this year for the first time. I might. Who are we looking at?
Annie Ryan got Charles Darwin in there.
Okay. There's really, though, two people that I really want to focus on to start talking about the evolutionary theory and how it came about. And the other guy is this individual. Can anybody in the chat tell me who that is? Give you a second. Who's this? Got Charles Darwin. Who's this?
It's not Lamarck.
What?
He's the other guy I think about. It's not Lamarck.
It's not Lamarck?
No.
This guy's super important to what we're talking about here. It's a person. Thank you, Darius. Darius never disappoints.
Hold on. I have something that might be helpful.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Wallace. Wallace is an interesting Wallace is an interesting one, but no, it's
This
not
would be
Wallace.
helpful. Who's this? Maybe that would
It's a special person. It's a male individual. Nobody sees it yet? Is that your
I know.
come over here, sweetheart.
Oh, I missed it. There's Charles Darwin. Who's this?
Uh-huh.
I think people are Googling to find out who's important.
I'm just trying here.
Noah. No, actually,
No, this is Noah.
should I tell him? Why is it Noah's? Should I tell him who it is?
It was supposed to be a hint. They
Yeah, it was a hint, and they don't get it.
like
Oh, I keep bumping my keyboard and going back to this picture of Charles Darwin.
and Noah. 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 Noah.
Oh,
Oh.
it's the yes, Erica. It's Charles. It's Charles Darwin.
No, I was trying to show you that, people age. Like that was Noah's, like, when he was 3, he's now 8. People age. There we go, Annie.
Yes.
Younger Charles Darwin.
All right. And why is this important? This is a younger Charles Darwin, and I show this picture because I think this is somebody that you can relate to, maybe more than you can relate to this guy. Because every time we talk about Charles Darwin, you picture him like this. Like he's frozen in time. Like he came out of his mother's womb with a beard and bald. This wasn't Charles Darwin. This was Charles Darwin later in life at the end when he gave up the evolutionary theory, when he finally published it. And I say finally published it because he didn't do it right away. And why didn't he do it right away? The same reason Mrs. Smith was like, I don't know if we should show that video. Because he was afraid that if he talked about what he believed and what he discovered and the science behind it, that he'd be ostracized, that people wouldn't pay attention to him, that they would shun him from society, that the church would turn their back on him, that his wife would be ruined, that, it was a big deal. It's still kind of a big deal. But this is the guy that came up with the idea. This is the guy that didn't like going to school. This is the guy that would have rather got up and went outside and played all day, put his boots on, grabbed his rifle, rode around on his horse, went hunting. He didn't have Xbox. I'm sure if he had Xbox, he would have been down there playing Xbox, right? But he liked to play cards and chess, right? This is the guy that went to med school and got kicked out because he was too squeamish to see people get their legs cut. Because back then, when you got your leg amputated, it's like they stuck a thing in your teeth and you bit on it and they took a hacksaw and cut your leg off, basically. Blood went everywhere. It was terrible.
Happy breakfast.
Yeah. And he went to med school and he saw that and he was like, I'm done. I'm done. Like he dropped out. So Charles had this very interesting childhood. And actually, after he dropped out, he comes home. Like he didn't come home right away. I think he played back and stayed back at school and played cards and stuff for a while. But then he finally comes home and his dad says, look, you got to do something. You can imagine coming home telling your dad you've dropped out of school. And his father says, why don't you become clergy? Why don't you go to school to become clergy, to become a priest, essentially, right? He's like, you'll get invited to the best parties. You don't even have to really believe in God. Just don't tell your wife. I think that was what his father actually said to him, right? So Charles goes to school, and he gets to school, and he studies with this guy, and they walk. He starts to study with a naturalist, and Charles was really interested in the outside. So he did a lot of stuff outside, like learning about life. There's like really goofy stories. Like he found a beetle and he grabbed it because he wanted to take it and study it. And then there was another beetle and he grabbed it. And then there was a third beetle. So he popped one in his mouth to grab the third one so he could hold on to all three. But the one he popped, it was like putting a stink bug in his mouth. It like shot something in his mouth and he ended up losing all his beetles. I mean, a terrible experience, I'm sure. But the idea is he spent a lot of time with this Professor Henslow, who was his professor at school, became very close to him. And so when it was time for Charles to like go to leave school to be done, Henslow comes to him and says, hey, I have an opportunity for you. There's this ship, and the ship is going to sail all around the world, and the captain needs a person to be his companion. And now you have to understand, back in those days when you sailed around the world on a ship with sails, the captain was like a god on that ship. And he didn't really have friends. So a lot of times captains would take somebody they could eat dinner with, play cards with, play music with, whatever. Charles is like, this is great. Goes home, tells his dad, hey, Dad, I'm going to get on the ship, sail around the world. What do you think Dad said? You need to answer in the chat. I know what you think Dad said. If you went home tonight and told your dad you're going to go on a ship and sail around the real world, Dad's like, this is stupid. You're not going to do it. Charles kept begging. Long story short, eventually Charles gets the okay. Charles writes the captain of the ship, says, I will do it. Gives his word, I'm going to come on your ship. Shows up. Here's the ship. This is the HMS Beagle. Charles walks onto the ship, finds out he cannot stand up because below cabins where his bed is he's too tall. He can't stand up. And he finds out while at anchor, that he gets terribly seasick. So now here he is. He signed up for like a year-long or whatever it was trip around the world. And he vomits all the time. And the ship hasn't started moving yet. He can't stand up. And he finds out who he's going to be spending the next year with. Because the guys on the ship, these are not pretty people. Would you go? Would you go, Mrs. Smith? Don't go.
Yeah,
Well,
I can too.
they're saying in the chat, don't go. Here's the problem. Back in Charles Darwin's time, when you gave your word and you said you were going to do something, you did it. Like if you said, hey, Mrs. Smith, I promise I'll turn that work in on Firefly that I'm missing to bring my grade up. You did it. You didn't come in the next day and go, oh, I'm sorry I couldn't. I had like family stuff to do. Elijah Milton. Like you did it. If you gave your word that you were going to be somewhere, you did it. So he ended up doing it. And so long story short, here he is. This is their trip around the world. They leave Europe, sail down around this way, around the South America, right? Up, they stop at this little important spot here called the Galapagos Islands, through the Pacific Ocean, down around Australia, which always surprises me that we hear so much about the Galapagos Islands, but Australia is like a really marvelous place for life too. Like, I wonder why we don't hear more about that. Through the Indian Ocean, now around the Horn of Africa, right? Back over to South America. And I think that this has to do with trade winds and stuff. It's actually faster to sail across the ocean and up than it would be to go straight up the coast because of like trade winds and ocean currents and things like that. So that is his trip. The Galapagos Islands right here off of South America, this little tiny island chain that's really, really important to this whole thing. And we're going to talk about why that is so important tomorrow. So Mrs. Smith, what did I leave? I kind of took off and ran on the life of Charles Darwin, but I think it's really important that they hear a little bit about that. What did I miss?
I think you got mostly everything.
But
yeah. I mean, one of the most important things we wanted to talk to you about is the fact that, when we talk about these ancient old dudes, you picture these people that their lives is that's all you know about, we've talked about Watson and Crick and like this discovery of DNA, like they were like sitting in a coffee shop, like stealing people's information. Like,
this guy's you. He's out doing what Dad didn't want him to do. He's out ramming around. He's, not being the best student in the world or whatever. I mean, he's more relatable to you. But he was a thinker. You know, he observed what's going on around him, and that's what we want you to see. So we want you to do something for us. In Moodle, if you go to Moodle, there is a link called Change Over Time. And if you click on that link,
once I open it,
it just gives you a slideshow. And I do need to change a setting here. I'll change the setting in here in a minute. We want you to go in, create a slide, and show us one organism that has changed over time. Describe it. Maybe a quick description. Give a picture of the organism, quick description. Put your names. If you want to work with somebody on it, like get together with somebody and kind of work virtually together on it, you could do that. You can do it on your own. We don't want you to put anything that other people posted. So we don't want like 70 slides of the same thing. So you're going to go out online. We give you permission to do a Google search. Look for organisms that have changed over time. Put a picture of it and describe what that change would be like. We know of a lot of organisms that have changed over time. And you could go at this several different ways. So we're leaving it very open-ended. Organisms that have changed over time. With the quick description, with the changes, pop your name on the slide. We're going to bring that slideshow up later in the week, and we're going to actually share it in the live stream. We're going to talk about it. That's right. So it will be to your benefit to have something, and we'll make it to your benefit to have something on there, maybe. All right. So let me stop sharing that. I do need to make sure I did this right. Make sure I did your restricted access right. All right, should be good. So that's it. We haven't touched anything yet.
Let's go.
So over the next couple of days, how does this happen? How does evolution happen? What are the mechanisms? Why do we think organisms are related? Why do we think? And if you can't tell, we're kind of excited about this. We like this topic. It's cool. So, Dominic, hit reload again. You'll have access to it.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and Eli with the spoiler on the Darwin's finches. We'll talk about that probably tomorrow.
Bounty time?
Yes, bounty time. Did anybody come today because somebody else requested that you come?
Speaking of bounty, great news. My bounty arrived over the weekend.
Your bounty?
My paper towel. I was on a bounty hunt myself for paper towels.
Did you use that to clean up the couch?
But yeah. There was
Or a buck ending last time. Nobody, no bounty today?
Oh, come on.
Should we make it open for tomorrow?
Here's the thing, like students emailed me about this bounty. I don't even see those students. Like where are they?
All right, there you go.
Oh, Erica said she brought people, but they need to say that you brought them.
Yeah, they need to say you brought them.
Yes, but Alexia, you've been here before. We want new people. Has Carlos and Esteban not been here before? Are we counting them? I don't have them. So I don't know.
Esteban's been here before, but I would probably count him and Carlos if they pop in the chat right now and say that Erica brought them.
And I'm guessing this is my Erica.
If they don't do that, then they didn't meet the requirements. The requirements were to not only come but to stay.
She hasn't been here for a week, Darius.
I don't know. Give it to him. Give it to him, Mrs. Smith.
All right.
He got her back. The bounty works. Tomorrow, at the end, we will ask if there's any bounties again. If you bring somebody and they pipe up and say, then we'll give you the points.
So what do I put in Firefly? Do I put bounty?
You could, or just put it under bonus points or whatever. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been 30 minutes. Please try and get that slideshow done. You don't have to necessarily have it done for tomorrow, but over the next day or two, I'd like to see that done. Probably Wednesday or Thursday, we'll be pulling that up. think maybe Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not sure. Bring somebody new tomorrow, Darius. The bounty is still there. Thank you, everybody that tuned in. Tomorrow we talk more about evolution and we find out why. Start to find out. Why is this theory there? Why do we think this is what happens? Why does all the science point towards evolution? And what does that mean? It'll be exciting. It's adventurous. It's evolution. We'll see you tomorrow. Wash your hands. Stay safe. We love you.